Some people only speak kindly in languages they think you'll never understand. The black Cadillac rolled silently beneath the amber lights of the Beaumont International Hotel, its polished frame reflecting Manhattan's midnight glow like dark water under a storm. Marcus Hale stepped out first, one hand holding the rear door open, while the other adjusted the cuff of his charcoal coat against the sharp October wind. 41 years old. Broad shoulders softened by exhaustion. Calm eyes that had learned long ago how to survive rooms where men like him were expected to stay invisible. Around him, the entrance buzzed with the soft machinery of wealth. Valets in pressed jackets. Women in heels sharp enough to sound expensive against marble. Men laughing too loudly beside towers of glass and gold. The annual Beaumont Global Investors Gala. The kind of night where people wore watches worth more than Marcus's apartment rent for 3 years combined. Claire Beaumont arrived 10 seconds later. Tall. Blonde hair swept into a precise knot. White silk gloves folded in one hand while her phone glowed endlessly in the other. She moved like someone used to elevators opening before she reached them. The staff straightened when they saw her. Even the air seemed to organize itself around her presence. Marcus had driven executives before. Senators. Athletes. Men worth 9 figures. But Claire Beaumont carried something colder than power. Precision. The kind that made people nervous before she even spoke. A French investor beside her leaned closer as they approached the hotel entrance. "C'est Louis?" the man asked quietly. Claire barely glanced toward Marcus before answering in smooth, effortless French. "Oui." Apparently the agency says he's professional, though I suppose even they can teach someone to open a car door. The men beside her laughed softly, not cruel enough to make a scene, just enough to sting. The kind of laughter rich people used when they wanted disrespect to sound elegant. Marcus heard every word, every syllable. The autumn wind lifted slightly beneath the awning. Somewhere across the street, a siren echoed through midtown traffic, but Marcus simply held the door open. "Good evening, ma'am," he said calmly. Claire stepped out without looking at him twice. That surprised him less than it should have. People revealed themselves most honestly when they believed no translation existed between worlds. Inside, crystal chandeliers burned above the ballroom like captured stars. Waiters floated through the crowd carrying champagne trays, while a string quartet played near the marble staircase. Marcus remained near the entrance beside the other drivers and hotel staff, hands folded loosely in front of him. Invisible again. Exactly where rooms like this preferred him. One of the younger valets leaned closer. "You okay, man?" Marcus gave a faint smile. "Why wouldn't I be?" The valet hesitated. "Because she was talking about you." Marcus glanced toward the ballroom where Claire now stood surrounded by investors in tailored black tuxedos. Her posture was flawless. Her smile carefully measured. Untouchable from a distance. "People say a lot of things when they think nobody understands," Marcus replied quietly. Then he picked up another set of keys and walked toward the garage elevator as if nothing had happened at all. Upstairs, Claire accepted another glass of champagne while half listening to a conversation about European acquisitions. But for reasons she couldn't explain, her eyes drifted briefly toward the lobby doors again, toward the quiet driver who never reacted. Never flinched, never lowered his head, and somehow that unsettled her far more than anger would have. By 9:30 that night, the ballroom had grown louder, warmer, looser around the edges. Expensive people always relaxed the same way once enough champagne entered the room. Ties loosened, smiles widened, voices climbed half a level too high. But Claire Beaumont only became sharper. She stood near the center of the ballroom beneath a chandelier shaped like falling glass, listening to 3 European investors debate expansion numbers while her assistant whispered updates into an earpiece beside her. $40 million here, $70 million there. Entire companies discussed with the emotional weight of weather reports. Across the room, Marcus stepped quietly. Through the service corridor carrying a garment bag another guest had forgotten downstairs. The hotel manager had asked him to deliver it personally to the VIP lounge. He moved through the crowd with the same calm rhythm he carried behind the wheel. Never rushed, Never in anyone's way. A waiter nearly collided with him near the marble staircase, wobbling dangerously with a tray of champagne flutes. Marcus steadied the tray before a single glass tipped over. "Easy," he said softly. "Long night." The young waiter exhaled shakily. "Thanks, man." Marcus nodded once and kept walking. Small kindnesses, quiet ones, the kind nobody applauded because nobody important noticed them. Upstairs near the investors' lounge, tension had begun curling beneath the surface of the evening. Claire's lead interpreter stood frozen beside a digital presentation screen, while two French executives argued in increasingly irritated tones. One of them slammed a folder shut. "That is not what the contract says," the older investor snapped in French. "Your translation changes the entire liability structure." Claire's jaw tightened. "Then explain it again." The interpreter swallowed hard. Sweat glistened beneath his collar. I may need a moment to review the wording." The room shifted instantly. Investors glanced at one another. Assistants stopped typing. A silence filled the lounge that felt expensive and dangerous at the same time. Claire stepped forward. Calm on the outside, ice underneath. "We do not have a moment," she said coldly. "We have 12 minutes before signatures." Marcus reached the doorway just as the older French executive muttered something bitter under his breath. Marcus paused, just for a second. His eyes moved toward the digital contract projected against the wall. French legal language stretched across the screen in clean black text. One clause highlighted in red. The interpreter translated again, voice uncertain this time. "The agreement guarantees cooperative restructuring under shared operational oversight." The older investor scoffed immediately. "No, that is not what it says." Claire closed her eyes briefly like someone fighting the beginning of a migraine. Then, Marcus spoke from the doorway, quietly, respectfully. "Actually, he is right." Every head turned at once. The room stilled so completely even the jazz music downstairs seemed far away now. Marcus stepped no farther into the room. He still held the garment bag over one arm like he suddenly regretted speaking at all. Claire looked at him with immediate disbelief. "Excuse me?" Marcus nodded once toward the screen. "The clause does not describe shared oversight." His voice remained calm, measured. "It describes unilateral surrender of controlling interests if projected losses exceed 7% during fiscal transition." Silence. One investor blinked slowly. Another lowered his wine glass halfway. Claire stared at Marcus like she had never seen him before in her life. The interpreter frowned. "That is not accurate." Marcus met his gaze politely. "The phrase session complete de operations does not mean cooperation." A pause. "It means complete operational forfeiture." The older French executive leaned back slowly in his chair. Then, for the first time that evening, he smiled. For a moment, nobody in the investors' lounge moved. The city lights beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows shimmered across polished glass tables and untouched champagne flutes while Marcus stood quietly near the doorway in his dark driver's coat, looking more out of place now than he had 5 seconds earlier. Because suddenly everyone in the room understood the same thing at once. The chauffeur was right. Claire turned slowly toward the digital contract again. Her eyes scanned the highlighted clause with sharpened focus while the older French investor adjusted his cufflinks and watched her carefully. "Read the final sentence aloud," he said in French. The interpreter hesitated. Marcus did not. "In the event of projected losses exceeding 7% during fiscal transition," he translated smoothly, "all operational authority transfers fully to Beaumont European Holdings until liabilities stabilize under executive supervision." One of the attorneys near the back stiffened immediately. Another reached for the contract folder with visible urgency. The meaning landed heavily now. Not partnership, not cooperation, control, complete control. Claire's expression did not crack, but something colder replaced her earlier confidence. "How did this get approved?" she asked quietly. Nobody answered right away. Silence moved through the room like smoke. The interpreter lowered his eyes first. The wording was more aggressive than expected. The older investor gave a dry laugh. "Aggressive?" He leaned back in his chair. Monsieur Hale just prevented your company from surrendering half its European division. Claire looked at Marcus again. Really looked this time. His posture remained relaxed. Hands steady. No arrogance. No satisfaction. Just calm observation, like a man commenting on weather patterns instead of saving a $400 million negotiation. You speak legal French? She asked carefully. Marcus shifted the garment bag slightly on his arm. Enough. Enough? One attorney repeated under his breath, almost offended by the understatement. Claire stepped closer now, heels soft against the marble floor. Where exactly did you learn it? Marcus met her gaze politely, mostly listening. The room almost laughed at that answer, but nobody fully did. Because something about him made mockery feel dangerous now. Claire folded her arms slowly. You expect me to believe you learned international contract law by listening? Marcus shrugged once. People say important things when they think service staff are invisible. The sentence landed harder than anyone expected, especially Claire. Her face remained composed, but her eyes flickered away for the briefest second. Somewhere beneath the polished control and executive calm, embarrassment finally entered the room. One of the French executives smiled openly now. Your driver is more useful than half the consultants we hired. Marcus answered before Claire could. I am not her driver. The correction was gentle, not defensive. Somehow that made it heavier. Claire glanced toward the black Beaumont logo glowing against the far wall. Then back at Marcus. Then what exactly are you? He considered the question for a moment. Tonight. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Apparently a very concerned bystander. A few quiet laughs broke the tension at last. Even Claire almost smiled before catching herself. But the atmosphere had changed now. Completely. The room no longer saw Marcus as background scenery beside a luxury sedan downstairs. He had become impossible to simplify, and people with power hated mysteries they could not immediately categorize. Claire straightened slightly, returning to business mode before emotion could settle too visibly on her face. Everyone take 10 minutes, she said firmly. We revised the language before signatures. Advisors moved instantly. Phones lit up. Attorneys gathered papers. The room awakened again in organized chaos. But Marcus remained where he was near the doorway, already fading back into quietness as though he preferred invisibility after all. Claire watched him for another long second before speaking again. Mr. Hale. He paused. Yes, ma'am. She studied him carefully now, almost cautiously. Do not leave the hotel tonight. Marcus blinked once, surprised by the request. Claire held his gaze steadily. I think we still need to talk. The gala ended close to midnight, but the hotel still pulsed with quiet luxury long after the investors disappeared behind black SUVs and tinted windows. Staff moved through the ballroom collecting empty glasses beneath dimmed chandeliers, while jazz drifted softly from hidden speakers overhead. The energy had changed now. Softer, more honest somehow, like the building itself was finally exhaling after hours of pretending. Marcus stood near the underground garage beside the Cadillac, rolling down his sleeves slowly while checking the time on his phone. 11:48. Too late for his daughter to still be awake. A small notification blinked across the cracked screen anyway. One unread voice message. Lille Hale. Marcus smiled faintly before pressing play. Hi, Daddy. The little girl whispered through the speaker. Miss Evelyn let me stay up 10 extra minutes because I finished my science project. I got an A-, but I still think it should have been an A. Also, I left you some macaroni in the fridge because you forget dinner when you work late. Okay, love you, bye. Marcus lowered the phone slowly. The kind of silence that follows a child's voice always felt different. Warmer. Fragile in a way money could never imitate. You have children? Claire's voice arrived from behind him unexpectedly. Marcus turned. She stood several feet away near the elevator doors, no longer surrounded by executives or assistants or flashing cameras. Without the ballroom lights and polished crowd around her, she looked strangely smaller somehow, more human. Her heels clicked softly across the concrete floor as she approached, the sharp scent of expensive perfume mixing with cold garage air and motor oil. Marcus slid the phone back into his pocket. "One daughter." Claire nodded once. "I heard the message. She talks loud when she is excited." For the first time that evening, Claire smiled without calculation behind it. It disappeared almost immediately, but Marcus noticed it anyway. "How old is she?" "8. And you work nights?" Marcus leaned lightly against the side of the Cadillac. "Nights pay more." Claire looked down briefly, almost uncomfortable with the simplicity of that answer. Somewhere overhead, an elevator hummed through the building. "You still have not answered my question," she said carefully. "Where did you learn French like that?" Marcus glanced toward the concrete floor for a moment before answering. "My wife was Haitian." Claire blinked once. The answer softened something invisible inside the conversation immediately. "Was?" Marcus nodded slowly. 3 years ago." The garage seemed quieter after that. Claire folded her arms lightly against the chill. "I am sorry." Marcus accepted the words with a small nod, neither inviting pity nor rejecting it, just letting it exist. "She used to read to Lily every night," he said. "French children's books mostly. My daughter did not want to forget her mother's voice after she passed." Claire listened silently now. "No interruptions. No executive instincts." Marcus continued calmly. "So I started learning. One word at a time at first. Then sentences. Then whole stories." His eyes drifted briefly toward the glowing Manhattan skyline beyond the garage entrance. "Turns out grief gives people strange motivation." Claire stared at him for several long seconds. Earlier that night she had used French like armor, a private language meant to separate herself from the people beneath her. But suddenly the same language felt entirely different standing here beside a tired father in a concrete garage near midnight. To her, French had always sounded like wealth, education, prestige. To Marcus it sounded like memory, family, love that refused to disappear quietly. Claire looked away first. "I misjudged you." Marcus gave the smallest shrug. "Most people do." The words carried no bitterness. Somehow that made them heavier. A cold gust swept through the garage entrance, lifting the edge of Claire's coat slightly. She studied him again carefully now, as though trying to understand how someone could move through humiliation without becoming cruel in return. "You never seemed angry tonight," she admitted softly. Marcus thought about that for a moment. Then he smiled faintly. "Being understood matters more to me than being admired." Claire lowered her eyes at that, because somewhere deep down, she realized she had spent most of her life chasing the exact opposite. The city was nearly asleep by the time Marcus finally drove home. Manhattan's towers glowed against the dark sky like tired giants refusing rest while rain began misting lightly across the windshield. The roads had emptied now. No honking taxis. No impatient executives. Just wet pavement stretching beneath yellow streetlights and the soft hum of tires rolling through midnight. Marcus loosened his tie with one hand at a red light and glanced toward the passenger seat where a small paper bag rested beside his phone. Inside sat a slice of chocolate cake wrapped carefully in napkins from the gala kitchen. Lily's favorite. He had almost forgotten it on the counter downstairs until one of the waitresses chased him into the garage smiling. "For your little girl," she had whispered. Marcus smiled, faintly remembering it. The apartment building in Queens looked exactly the same as always when he pulled in 25 minutes later. Old brick, flickering hallway light, laundry smell drifting through cracked windows. Nothing glamorous, nothing polished, but it was home. He climbed the stairs quietly carrying his jacket over one shoulder and unlocked apartment 3B as softly as possible. The television glowed faintly inside the dark living room. Marcus stepped in and froze for a second. Lily was asleep sideways on the couch beneath a blanket covered in tiny yellow stars. One math workbook open across her chest with a pencil still tucked between her fingers. Miss Evelyn, the elderly neighbor who watched her during late shifts, sat asleep in the armchair nearby with knitting needles resting in her lap. Marcus smiled tiredly. "Some people loved you quietly, in casseroles, in babysitting favors, in half-finished scarves and lights left on after midnight. He moved carefully across the room, lifted the workbook from Lily's chest, and noticed the page she had circled before falling asleep. French vocabulary, basic greetings. Tiny, uneven handwriting filled the margins.
Bonjour. Merci. Je t'aime.
Marcus swallowed slowly. Daddy. Lily's sleepy voice cracked through the quiet room. Her eyes barely opened. You are home. I am home, Peanut. She pushed herself upright immediately. Did rich people act weird again? Marcus laughed softly under his breath. That depends how you define weird. Lily squinted suspiciously. Did anybody say something rude? Children always noticed more than adults expected. Marcus sat gently beside her on the couch. A lady made assumptions tonight. Because you are black? She asked bluntly. Marcus looked at her carefully. 8 years old and already learning how the world measured people before hearing them speak. Partly. Lily frowned hard enough to wrinkle her forehead. Did you get mad? Marcus thought about Claire standing alone in that cold garage. About her face when she realized what French meant to him. About the strange sadness hidden beneath all her expensive confidence. No, he answered quietly. Sometimes people carry loneliness so long they mistake it for superiority. Lily blinked slowly. That sounded like a grown-up sentence. It is almost 1 in the morning. Everything sounds philosophical after midnight. That finally made her laugh. Small, sleepy, honest. Marcus handed her the paper bag from the gala. Her eyes widened instantly. Chocolate cake. Fancy chocolate cake, he corrected. Probably costs $12 a slice. Lily gasped dramatically. That is criminal. Marcus smiled while she took a bite, chocolate frosting smudging instantly near the corner of her mouth. Then her expression softened suddenly. Daddy. Yeah. Mom would have liked tonight, huh? The room grew still again. Rain tapped lightly against the apartment windows while somewhere down the hall an old radiator hissed awake. Marcus looked toward the bookshelf near the kitchen where a faded photograph rested beside a stack of French storybooks. Camille Hale smiling on a summer afternoon with wind in her hair and sunlight across her face. Some griefs never left. They just learned better manners over time. Marcus reached over and gently wiped frosting from Lily's cheek with his thumb. Yeah, he whispered. She would have. Across the city at that exact moment, Claire Beaumont stood alone inside her penthouse kitchen staring silently at a French contract she could no longer read the same way again. Claire Beaumont had not slept well in years, but that night felt worse than usual. The silence inside her penthouse stretched too wide after midnight, filling every marble hallway and glass wall with a kind of emptiness money could not decorate away. She stood barefoot near the kitchen counter wearing an oversized cream sweater, one hand wrapped around untouched tea gone cold almost an hour earlier. Below her, Manhattan glittered endlessly beneath rain-slick streets and moving headlights. Beautiful from a distance, exhausting up close. The French contract still sat open on the island counter beside her tablet. She had reread the same clause 4 times now, not because she doubted the translation anymore, but because she could still hear Marcus's voice correcting it calmly from the doorway. No arrogance. No performance. Just truth offered quietly. That unsettled her most. Claire had spent her entire adult life around men desperate to prove themselves. Men who interrupted. Men who bragged. Men who mistook confidence for volume. But Marcus Hale had stood inside a room full of billion-dollar egos and spoken like someone who did not need anyone's approval to know his worth. Her phone buzzed softly against the counter. Amelia, her assistant. Claire answered immediately. Did you find him?
Mr. Hale?
Amelia asked carefully. Yes. A short pause. I did. Claire stared out across the city lights. And there is not much to tell. He works private driving contracts mostly at night. No criminal record. No lawsuits. Nothing unusual. Amelia hesitated slightly. Though what? Several clients specifically requested him repeatedly over the years. Claire frowned faintly. Why? Papers shifted quietly over the phone. The notes are strange. How so? Amelia cleared her throat. One client wrote, "Best driver I ever hired because he listens like your life matters." Another said he once stayed 2 extra hours unpaid to help an elderly passenger after a panic attack. Claire lowered her eyes slowly. Amelia continued. One woman wrote that he carried her sleeping son up 3 flights of stairs during a snowstorm because she had a broken wrist. Silence settled between them. Claire leaned against the counter now, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt beneath the polished armor she wore so effortlessly in public. "Anything else?" she asked quietly. "Just one thing." Amelia's voice softened unexpectedly. "Every review mentions how calm he is." After the call ended, Claire remained standing motionless beside the darkened windows. Calm. She thought about that word carefully. Calm was not weakness. She knew weak men very well. Weak men needed rooms to shrink around them. Weak men insulted waiters, interrupted assistants, used power loudly because they feared silence. Marcus did none of those things. Somehow his stillness carried more gravity than most executives she knew. Claire finally walked toward the bookshelf lining the far wall of her penthouse living room. Hundreds of carefully arranged books sat untouched beneath soft recessed lighting. French poetry, economic theory, international law. First editions bought more for image than comfort. Her fingers paused unexpectedly on a small worn copy of Le Petit Prince tucked near the bottom shelf. The Little Prince. Her mother used to read it aloud when Claire was a little girl growing up in Connecticut before French became the language of boardrooms and negotiations instead of bedtime stories. She opened the cover slowly. A faded inscription rested inside, written in elegant blue ink. "Language means nothing if it does not make people feel seen." Claire stared at the sentence for a long time. Then suddenly she remembered Marcus saying, "Being understood matters more to me than being admired." The same idea. Different lives. Something tightened quietly in her chest. Across the city in Queens, Marcus sat at the kitchen table long after Lily had fallen back asleep. Rain tapped softly against the windows while he translated another old French letter from Camille into English inside a spiral notebook for his daughter to read someday. His handwriting moved slowly beneath the yellow kitchen light. Patient, careful, loving. The apartment smelled faintly of chocolate cake and coffee. And without realizing it, in 2 very different homes separated by money, class, and miles of Manhattan steel, 2 lonely adults sat awake thinking about the exact same conversation. 3 days passed before Claire Beaumont saw Marcus again. In her world, 3 days usually erased people. Meetings replaced memories. Numbers buried emotions. New crises arrived before old ones had time to matter. But somehow Marcus lingered. In elevator mirrors, in late-night silences, in the strange discomfort she now felt every time someone in her company spoke dismissively to hotel staff or assistants within earshot. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold over Manhattan. Rainwater streaked down the windows of Beaumont Global Headquarters, while employees flooded the marble lobby carrying coffee cups and glowing phones. Claire stepped out of the elevator at exactly 8:10 wearing a charcoal coat and black heels sharp enough to echo through the entire executive floor. Perfect as always. Untouchable as always. Except this morning her assistant noticed something unusual immediately. "You canceled your investor breakfast?" Amelia asked, carefully while walking beside her. Claire removed her gloves slowly. "Reschedule it." That meeting took 6 weeks to arrange. Claire kept walking. "Then they can survive 6 more days." Amelia blinked, confused. Claire never canceled anything, especially not for vague reasons delivered without explanation. But before Amelia could ask more, Claire stopped near the glass conference room overlooking midtown traffic below. Marcus sat quietly inside translating documents beside one of the legal teams. Calm, focused, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. Reading glasses low against the bridge of his nose. He looked nothing like the executives surrounding him, yet somehow more grounded than all of them combined. Claire watched unnoticed through the glass for a moment longer than necessary. One attorney interrupted Marcus halfway through a sentence. "No offense, but are you certain this terminology applies to international acquisitions?" Marcus looked up calmly. I am. The attorney smirked faintly. And your legal background is? Marcus closed the folder softly before answering. Widower. Father. Night driver. The room grew awkwardly silent. Then Marcus added with the faintest smile. And a man who reads very carefully when lawyers write in languages they assume poor people do not understand. Even the attorney laughed quietly after that. Claire looked down briefly, hiding a smile of her own before entering the room. Everyone straightened immediately. Meetings always change temperature when Claire Beaumont entered. But today something felt different, softer around the edges. Good morning, she said evenly. Her eyes moved briefly toward Marcus.
Mr. Hale.
He nodded politely.
Ma'am.
Claire placed another folder on the table. The Paris division sent revised documents overnight. I would like a second review before signatures. One of the executives frowned. Our translation team already approved those. Claire did not look away from Marcus when she answered. So did the last team. Silence. Sharp and immediate. Nobody argued after that. 2 hours later, the meeting finally ended. Executives disappeared back into elevators and offices while Marcus gathered his papers quietly near the conference table. Claire remained behind, pretending to organize notes she had already memorized. She waited until the room emptied completely before speaking again. You make people uncomfortable, she said softly. Marcus glanced up.
Doi.
You stay calm when they expect anger. Claire folded her arms lightly. Most people do not know what to do with that. Marcus considered the city skyline outside the windows for a moment. Anger is expensive, he said quietly. Single parents cannot afford it often. Claire stared at him carefully now. There it was again. That strange ability he had to turn ordinary sentences into mirrors people accidentally saw themselves inside. You always answer questions like that? She asked. Like what? Like somebody twice your age who already figured life out. Marcus smiled faintly while sliding papers into his worn leather bag. Life humbles you faster when you do not have money protecting you from consequences. Claire lowered her eyes briefly at that. Somewhere beneath the tailored suits and billion-dollar schedules, the truth landed harder than she wanted to admit. Then Marcus's phone buzzed softly against the table. Lily's name lit the screen beside a tiny sunflower emoji. Marcus answered immediately. His entire face changed within seconds. Softer, warmer, human in a completely different way. Hey, Peanut, he said gently. Claire froze without meaning to. She had never heard a man with a voice like his speak so carefully before. No, I did not forget. Science fair tonight at 6:30. I will be there. A pause. Then Marcus laughed quietly. Yes, even if your volcano explodes this year. Claire looked away toward the rain-covered windows because suddenly the room felt too personal to stand inside comfortably. By 6:15 that evening, the rain had stopped and Queens smelled faintly of wet pavement and autumn leaves. Marcus parked his old gray Ford beside PS 148 and checked the time again before stepping out with Lily's science project balanced carefully in both hands. The papier-mâché volcano leaned slightly to one side, painted bright red near the top where fake lava curled down the edges in glitter glue. It is crooked because science is unpredictable, Lily had insisted earlier with complete confidence. Marcus smiled, remembering it while walking toward the school entrance beneath strings of paper stars taped across the windows. Inside, the elementary gym buzzed with folding chairs, proud parents, and the unmistakable chaos of children explaining projects far too loudly. Trifold boards lined long cafeteria tables beneath fluorescent lights while teachers smiled through visible exhaustion. Lily spotted Marcus immediately from across the room. Daddy! She sprinted toward him in sneakers that lit up blue against the polished gym floor before wrapping both arms around his waist. Marcus nearly lost the volcano balancing it one-handed. Easy there, future scientist. Lily pulled back dramatically. Mrs. Delgado said, I have the most realistic eruption simulation in 3rd grade. That sounds both impressive and slightly dangerous. Exactly. Marcus laughed quietly while setting the project down beside her display table. Nearby parents smiled at the exchange without realizing how much Marcus treasured ordinary moments like this.
No luxury ballroom.
No investors. Just fluorescent lights, construction paper planets, and a little girl excited about baking soda explosions. Real life usually looked smaller than people expected. Better too.
Mr. Hale.
Marcus turned at the unfamiliar voice. Mrs. Delgado approached holding a clipboard against her chest. Lily has talked about you nonstop all week. Lily groaned instantly. Mrs. Delgado. It is true, the teacher continued warmly. She told the entire class her father speaks French better than movie stars. Marcus raised one eyebrow toward Lily. Did she now? Lily crossed her arms. I was marketing your brand. Before Marcus could answer, another voice spoke softly behind him. Then apparently the marketing campaign worked. Marcus turned fully this time and nearly froze. Claire Beaumont stood near the gym entrance wearing a dark wool coat over simple black slacks. Her blonde hair pulled back loosely instead of perfectly styled for cameras or boardrooms.
No assistants.
No security. No polished corporate armor. Just Claire holding a small bookstore bag in one hand, while 30 confused elementary school parents quietly recognized her face from magazines and business news channels. Lily blinked up at her father. Daddy? Marcus looked equally stunned. Miss Beaumont. Claire suddenly looked almost uncertain for the first time since he had met her. I realized I interrupted your phone call earlier, she said carefully. You mentioned a science fair. Lily narrowed her eyes immediately with the terrifying accuracy children possessed. You are the mean French lady. Silence. Complete and immediate. Marcus closed his eyes briefly under his breath while nearby parents pretended very hard not to listen. Claire stared at Lily for one stunned second before something unexpected happened. She laughed. Quietly. Honestly. That is unfortunately fair. Lily looked surprised by the response. Most adults defended themselves around children. Claire crouched slightly to Lily's eye level instead. For what it is worth, she added gently. Your father was much kinder to me than I deserved. Lily glanced suspiciously between them. Did you apologize? Claire nodded once without hesitation. I did. Marcus watched the exchange silently, something unreadable moving across his face. Claire held out the bookstore bag toward Lily. Peace offering. Lily opened it carefully and gasped. Inside sat a hardcover French children's science encyclopedia with colorful planets across the cover. Daddy, she whispered, eyes wide. It has French volcanoes. Marcus laughed softly under his breath. I am not sure volcanoes belong to specific countries, Peanut. But Lily was already flipping excitedly through the pages beneath the gym lights while Claire stood quietly beside them. And for the first time in a very long while, Claire Beaumont realized she could not remember the last room where nobody cared how rich she was. 2 weeks later, the city slipped quietly into early November. Trees along Queens sidewalks burned orange beneath cold morning light while Manhattan prepared for another season of holiday displays and expensive distractions. But some changes happened too slowly for headlines to notice. At Beaumont Global, employees began speaking differently when assistants entered rooms. Waiters received eye contact now instead of passing indifference. Claire Beaumont started learning people's names she once would have forgotten within seconds. Nobody understood exactly why. They only knew the atmosphere around her had softened in strange, almost invisible ways. One Tuesday afternoon, Claire stood near the executive coffee station, watching an exhausted intern struggle to carry 3 heavy presentation binders at once. 6 months ago, she might have walked past without noticing. Today, she stepped forward automatically. Here, she said quietly, taking half the stack before the young woman could protest. The intern nearly panicked. Miss Beaumont, I can manage. I know, Claire replied calmly. You should not have to alone. Small moment, small sentence. But nearby employees noticed anyway. Kindness always looked louder in places built on hierarchy. That same evening, Claire sat alone in her office after everyone else had gone home. Manhattan glowed gold beyond the windows while soft jazz drifted quietly from hidden speakers overhead. Her desk remained buried beneath contracts and acquisition reports, but her attention rested elsewhere tonight. On the corner of her desk sat a photograph Lily had insisted she keep after the science fair. The volcano project leaned sideways in the picture while Lily grinned proudly beside it. Marcus stood behind her smiling softly with one hand resting on her shoulder. Claire had not realized until recently how rarely she saw genuine happiness around wealth. Satisfaction, yes. Victory, often. But peace? Almost never. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Marcus. Lily wants to know if volcanoes count as French exports now. Claire laughed quietly to herself before typing back. Only the fashionable ones. A second later, another message arrived. A photograph this time. Lily asleep on the couch surrounded by open science books while the French encyclopedia Claire bought rested across her lap. One small sock half falling off her foot. Claire stared at the image longer than she meant to. The apartment behind Lily looked modest. Warm lighting. Worn furniture. Homework scattered beside cereal bowls. Nothing curated. Nothing performative. Just life being lived honestly. And suddenly Claire understood something painful. She had spent years building rooms impressive enough to silence people. Marcus built rooms safe enough for people to rest inside. The difference sat heavily in her chest. 30 minutes later, Claire finally shut down her office computer and reached into her leather bag before leaving. Inside rested a thin hardcover book wrapped carefully in brown paper. A first-edition French children's collection she had found earlier that afternoon in a small bookstore near Lexington Avenue. The owner said it was rare. Claire only cared because the illustrations reminded her of the way Lily smiled. The next morning, Marcus found the package waiting at the front desk downstairs beside his mailbox. No note outside, just his name written neatly across the paper in elegant handwriting. He carried it upstairs carefully while Lily followed behind, still wearing dinosaur pajamas beneath her winter coat. "What is it?" she whispered dramatically like they were handling treasure. Marcus opened the package slowly at the kitchen table. Inside rested the antique French storybook along with a single handwritten card tucked between the pages. Marcus read the note silently at first, then again more slowly. Lily tugged his sleeve impatiently. "Daddy, what does it say?" Marcus looked down at the card once more before answering softly. "It says, 'Thank you for reminding me that fluency means nothing if you do not speak with kindness.'" The apartment grew quiet for a moment beneath the soft hum of the radiator. Lily smiled first. "I think the mean French lady is becoming nice." Marcus laughed under his breath while tracing the edge of the handwritten card carefully between his fingers. Outside, cold November sunlight spilled across Queens rooftops, while somewhere far beyond the apartment windows Manhattan continued racing loudly toward success. But inside that small kitchen, beside coffee cups and children's books and the lingering scent of cinnamon oatmeal, something quieter had already won.